Okay.
Hello, my name is Kenneth Hardcastle,
I am Anna Karras.
and we're here with the Collier County Public Library Virtual Book Club to discuss When the Apricots Bloom by Gina Wilkinson. When the Apricots Bloom follows three women in Iraq 2002, a world under the thumb of brutal dictator Saddam Hussein and his pervasive secret police. Ali Wilson comes to the country as an Australian diplomat's wife, desperate to learn more about her mother. Huda, who works in the ambassador's office as a secretary, is tasked with befriending and spying on her by the secret police. Rania, Huda's estranged best friend, is also drawn into this web of deceit. Everybody keeps secrets, and it's a novel that tests the boundaries of trust, motherhood, and friendship, and shows the impossible questions that the deadly regime forced onto its people. So, what did you think about it?
Well, I enjoyed the book. I thought it was something that it was a time period. Well, I've lived through the time period, so it's not like I'm unfamiliar with 2002, but it's set in Iraq, which is not something I had read about before. Just basically my knowledge of the Iraqi wars is what I heard about on the news. I've never read something from the point of view of an Iraqi woman living in the regime of Saddam Hussein, and I found it to be fascinating and harrowing to read.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a really fascinating book, like you said. It recreates a specific moment in time between the axis of evil and the fall of Saddam Hussein that's ripe for analysis and drama. So obviously when George W. Bush declared Iraq as part of the axis of evil in 2002 during his State of the Union address, that really ruffled some feathers in Iraq, as you might imagine. Mm-hmm. And, it was offensive to the normal Iraqi citizen.
Right.
Most of whom wouldn't be, evil people.
No. I mean, just because you live in Iraq does not mean that you pledged fealty to Saddam Hussein. Most people didn't.
Right.
But they went along with it out of fear for themselves and their families.
So Gina Wilkinson is is an Australian citizen, moved to Baghdad in 2002 where her husband worked for UNICEF. Saddam Hussein was in power. The country was isolated from the rest of the world and its people were suffering. Foreign journalists were banned from Iraq, and she was a journalist, so she didn't do any reporting during that time period, which could have had dire consequences. One of her closest Iraqi friends was an informant and informed on her. So that's where she kind of got the idea for this novel. There's always a question in my mind about an author who writes in a culture that's not their own. Is the representation true to the people? Is it made in good faith? And what damage could it cause if it's not? Mm-hmm. And this book really passes that test to me.
It did for me as well.
So she drew from her own experiences. She published a memoir in 2007 called Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sky. And but she hadn't fully processed all the trauma that occurred in that time frame. So this book struck me as a way to continue the healing process, forgive the woman who informed on her, and who might have led to a lot of pain.
I think a lot of writers use their stories as some form of therapy. Mm-hmm. To work through their issues.
Absolutely. So let's take a look at the questions we have.
Great.
Question 1. This book was partly inspired by the author's own experiences living in Baghdad under Saddam Hussein. What did you learn about life for ordinary Iraqis that surprised you?
Well, the thing that surprised me the most was how westernized they were. I mean, I knew that they lived there are cities and everything, but I mean, they just seemed very. I mean, they were Western in a way, and like the kid had Star Wars sheets, and slept with, what was it, a Wookiee?
Chewbacca,
yes. Yeah, and that just seemed very Western to me, and I found that to be interesting. I also found the stereotypical gender roles mega enforced. Wasn't necessarily a surprise, but I did find it to be a little startling compared to my own perceptions of the way things are in 2021 in the United States, which is vastly different.
I wonder how much of the westernization was the author's influence, or how much she saw in that.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that's something that's hard for us to know.
Because obviously the food that they ate, and the ceremony of drinking tea when you have people over in your home is something that's definitely part of the Iraqi culture and nothing to do with us. And just using my own American brain to judge another person's culture, I realize is a problem. So I must stop that. Bad librarian.
So for my part, something that surprised me was that there wasn't more obedience instilled in these children, given the regime and the influences they were living under. So I felt like the kids should have known about the situation with the secret police, should have known that you don't want to be around them, you don't want to antagonize them. And when their mother came and said, it's time to hide, they should go do it.
However, they were the two kids in the book were teenagers, so teenagers, regardless of where you are in the world, are automatically inclined to be disobedient.
That's fair. I also heard that we had some insight that there's that part of the culture is that the father is the lawgiver. You obey him, and you don't necessarily obey the mother. So that may have come into play for at least one of the children.
Right.
The other child didn't have a father.
Right.
So wouldn't have been the case for her necessarily.
Correct.
All right, question 2. If you were in Huda's situation, how would you have responded to the orders from the secret police? Should Huda have felt guilty about any of her actions?
I think that the position that Huda was put into was impossible. You are obviously not wanting to hurt your family, because they don't hurt you when they want something from you. They threaten your family, the things that you love the most, the people you love the most. And Huda probably wouldn't have cared if it had just been herself. She would have, I don't know if she might have defied them if she didn't have a husband and a son to think of. But the Mukhabarat, the secret police, definitely were just evil. I mean, they threatened to put Huda's son into the Fedayeen, which is the Uday Hussein's collection of young boys sent out to kill people and put their heads on spikes. I mean, to do that to a 14-year-old, what that would do to a 14-year-old, what it would do to anybody, but especially a child, is so. Should she feel guilty? I suppose in a way, yes, because she knows what she's doing is wrong. But in another way, you can justify it because, like I said, it's an impossible situation. I can't come up with an answer to that question.
It is a very difficult question, partially because you never know how you respond to a situation of stress in advance.
No.
And partially because, like you said, it has no good answers.
Right.
The only option is compliance because they'll go after your family. They'll find a way to hurt you. If she had embraced the role of being embraced the role of being an informant, then she may have done all right by just passing on little tidbits about Allie's schedule or the people she was talking to or what they were talking about. And that's basically what they were asking her for, just little things. And that's what her husband, who was also roped into it, that's what her husband was happy to do.
Right. Much more happy than Huda in the beginning.
And it's possible that that would have been enough for them and they would have been happy with that, but it's also possible they would have pushed for more, especially in a fiction situation.
I think
they're going to.
Just the nature of the secret police would be to escalate things, to push people more and more to get more than they asked for, and just continue that escalation.
So there would have been no escape from that, and you would have to, your only option then is to escape, which
Correct.
eventually becomes the plan. And as far as guilt, no, it wasn't Huda's fault.
No.
But it takes a lot of therapy and perspective about yourself in that situation to believe that. So if she didn't feel guilty about it, then Huda would have been a very different character.
She wouldn't have had the empathy and the kindness that she has.
Yep.
Right.
Question number 3. Compared to Huda, how does Rania handle pressure from the regime? And does her family's status protect her?
The family, Rania was born into the household. Her father was a sheik, which meant that her family had status. They had money when she was a child. That when her father died, and there was her mother, was it her stepmother or her mother? I think it was her mother. It was her mother, yes, who had a very how should we say? She was very used to living in a certain way and had a taste for luxury items. So she blew through most of the money that was left over. So Rania had no money, was selling off bits and pieces of her father's estate, living in a crumbling house, and the protection that she had from her father's name had slowly fallen away with the installation of Saddam Hussein. So yes, she had a quasi sort of protection from her father, but it wasn't much by the time we meet her.
The start of the novel for her is selling off the last of her father's books.
Yeah.
She's still afforded a measure of respect in the family name, in her bearing, in her profession as an artist, who are fairly well venerated in Iraqi society. And the regime isn't too interested in her until they decide to assign her to do some art for the state. And
specifically a portrait of Saddam Hussein.
Exactly. And then from there they become interested in her young daughter, and that motivates Rania for the rest of the book and puts her in the same boat as Huda.
Correct.
Question 4. Allie is desperate to find a connection to her mother. Given the restrictions she's under, do you think her subterfuge is justified?
I think Allie, as a Westerner, has no idea what she's stumbled into. She doesn't seem to sense the danger that she is in. And I think it's less of a arrogance and more of a naivete that puts her in her precarious position. Her mother dies when she's very young. I think she's 5 years old, and the family never talks about her mother, and so she feels that there's this hole in her that needs to be filled. She knows that her mother lived in Baghdad in the 1970s working as a nurse. And she goes there when she has the opportunity, when her husband becomes a diplomat for the Australian government in Iraq. She takes the opportunity to go to see if she can find more about her mother, but what she finds is not very happy making.
Mm-hmm. And you can see where she's coming from.
Right.
She wants to know more about her mother. She knows she worked in Iraq at some point in her life. And she's not going to get straight answers from official channels in Iraq. And she's a journalist. So if she can just go in and find and interview the right person, then her mother's past will open up for her like a book, and she can get whatever closure she's looking for. Unfortunately, it's one of the worst times and places to go snooping about.
Yes.
And to a history that's pretty dark, and consequences that get people killed.
Yep.
So you can't really look at all that and say that her actions were justified, but you can sympathize with her.
Of course.
She's a naive, clueless foreigner in a place that's not friendly to those.
Yes.
And she's not naive as a woman.
No.
But she is pretty clueless about what's appropriate where she is. And she's warned repeatedly.
Repeatedly. Up and down.
Question 5.
Yes.
Huda's husband, Abdul Amir, plays a key role in the book. To what extent does he influence Huda's decisions, and did your perception about him alter over time?
Well, Abdul Amir, at first, is a man who has done all the right things in his life. He went to school, went to college, got a good job, married, had a child, and then with the installation of Saddam Hussein, he lost everything, his job. His wife is now supporting them, which is a terrible shame for him. And he's trying to do what he can to sort of restore that masculinity that has been damaged. And he does some things that I don't like very much in the beginning, but by the end of the book, without spoiling it, he does change in my mind with regard to his concern for his child and his wife.
Mm-hmm. Huda and Abdul Amir were married for 16 years. And when you're in a relationship for that long, so much of both of you is interconnected. So all of her actions take him into account, consciously or not. And she's always thinking how he's going to respond to whatever she's done now. And she's taking actions she knows he's going to dislike, but the safety of her child is paramount. So that's what her emphasis is. And for his part, Abdul Amir knows that something is wrong with Huda, but likely just attributes it to the stress caused by the secret police and the situation that they're in.
Correct.
And yeah, like you said, my perception didn't really change until the very end, because
Mm-hmm.
that's when we got to see a different side of the character.
Yes.
So yeah.
And since the point of view in the story is rotating between the three women, he is basically a secondary character. We don't get into his brain at
Right.
all. So, therefore, we don't honestly know what is going on in his head until we see his actions.
Yeah, same for Tom Wilson. Same for the secret
Correct.
police.
Correct.
There's some interesting side characters as well.
Yes.
That could have provided some more insight if we were to see the insides of their brains. But that
Right.
wasn't the book we were focusing on.
No, no.
We're going to have a Zoom discussion next Tuesday, May 25th. You can email me at this address. Ooh. Oh no, go back. Email me, kenneth.hardcastle@colliercountyfl.gov to get an invite, or go onto our website, collierlibrary.org, and click on the events page to find out more. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and we'll see you later.
We look forward to seeing you next week. If you come, we always have a good time.
Thanks very much.